Joining me now is Jonathan Feiner, former Chief of Staff to Secretary of State John Kerry and a contributor to Foreign Policy magazine, Evan Siegfried, Republican strategist, the author of GOP GPS, and David Corn, Washington Bureau Chief for Mother Jones and an MSNBC political analyst. David, the record is voluminous. The record shows this claim of a wiretap is false.
Well, of course it does. And it's also true that the Justice Department has no evidence that there's an Easter bunny, and there's no evidence that Barack Obama mugged Donald Trump in the streets of New York in 1987. He just says stuff. Sometimes it pops into his head, sometimes it comes from Breitbart. Today it came from Fox, from a guy he called a very talented legal mind who happens to be a 9/11 truther, Andrew Napolitano. And Napolitano.
Sure.
And when, Trump gets caught, he says, well, it wasn't me. I'm just the president here. You should go after Fox. He's essentially saying, they report, we repeat. And that's it. And he doesn't feel that he has any obligation to vet anything that he says or tweets. And you don't, but you almost have to feel sorry for the Sean Spicers, Kellyanne Conways, who are people who know better but pretend they don't.
Right, that's become part of their job, is to pretend otherwise. The wiretapping story here also causing international problems, with Sean Spicer citing that debunked report claiming that Britain's intelligence services wiretapped him as well. Jonathan, unpack that for us.
Yeah, so look, I think that the president hit an unbelievably negative trifecta in his press availability with Chancellor Merkel today. One, he reopened the wound with the UK that his team had tried to clean up earlier in the morning by, again, asserting that they had wiretapped him when we all know that that's not the case. He also dragged the Chancellor and the German government into this fray, which I'm sure was the last thing they wanted when they're trying to build relations with this United States.
We didn't book a body language expert, but she didn't look into it.
Yeah, I think everybody
didn't look like she liked it.
But the third piece of this, which I think is the most troubling, is he further drew down his own eroding credibility. Now, there's going to be a time at some point when the president faces a crisis that's not of his making, and he will need that credibility to be able to go to allies and be able to go to the country and say, trust me, this is what is happening and this is what we need to do. And he is undermining his ability to build up that trust.
And Evan, take a listen to Donald Trump trying to say that this all comes back to whether or not he used scare quotes.
Don't forget, when I say wiretap, those words were in quotes. That really covers, because wiretapping is pretty old-fashioned stuff, but that really covers surveillance and many other things. And nobody ever talks about the fact that it was in quotes. We have it before the committee, and we will be submitting things before the committee very soon. That hasn't been submitted as of yet. But it's potentially a very serious situation. All we did was quote a certain very talented legal mind who was the one responsible for saying that on television. I didn't make an opinion on it. That was a statement made by a very talented lawyer on Fox.
You see the MSNBC fact check on each of those claims. These are falsehoods that he seems to think will still work with somebody?
They'll work with his base, who will buy anything he sells. But it's not factually true. Every single organization has said it's not true, and it's distracting. And the fact that the President of the United States has gone out and basically said the buck stops somewhere over there and not with me, like Harry Truman once said, is very disturbing. The President of the United States has also accidentally admitted that if anybody puts something in front of him, he's going to believe it. So if I tell him I'm the creator of Sesame Street, and he's now going to believe it by that. And as a Republican, I'm very concerned by that. We have, in one day, as Jonathan mentioned, upset our closest ally, and one of the closest allies we'll need, especially in the fight on ISIS, as well as to deal with the refugee crisis that's going on in Syria. I don't understand how today was a productive day, and throwing somebody else under the bus and not taking personal responsibility and saying, I'm sorry, I messed up. That's not presidential, and that's not something we need in a leader. Right, and David, there are larger politics on that. I mean, Evan brings up Sesame Street. This is like when they were always telling Big Bird the Snuffleupagus, was around the corner, and eventually Big Bird didn't believe it because they never made contact. And so there's a credibility analogy to be made there, but I don't want to stretch it too far. I want you to listen to Tom Cole, a Republican here, talking about what should happen next. Because it's all well and good to say, oh, well, Donald Trump does this, and his base likes it, and that's the end of the story. That's not the end of the story. The story is just starting. He is a new president. Here's a Republican saying what should be done.
Frankly, unless you can produce some pretty compelling proof, and I think the president, President Obama is owed an apology in that regard, because if he didn't do it, we shouldn't be reckless in accusations that he did.
David?
Well, that's at the very least. I don't think we'll ever see Donald Trump apologize for everything he has said. He was asked during the campaign, have you ever regretted anything? Have you ever had to apologize? And he said, after 70 years, no. So there will be no apology. This is a fellow who can never concede really doing anything wrong, from his bankruptcies to his lies. It doesn't matter. But I do think Jonathan Feiner's point from early on is the dead-on thing. Right now, we have Rex Tillerson and others talking about going to war with North Korea, and Jonathan is right. One day the president will have to say, listen, we have intelligence saying this or that, and because of that we took military action. And how can you believe Donald Trump on anything? That intelligence could be something that he heard on Alex Jones's radio show that morning. This is a guy who can't tell the difference between real facts, alternative facts, and things he just makes up.
Yeah, I mean, look, I obviously agree with that, and I think one of the big problems that we have right now is there are too few people with credibility on these issues who are speaking on behalf of the United States, and that starts, frankly, with the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, who thankfully has now started allowing briefings to be conducted from the State Department. We didn't have any between roughly January 19th and March 6th, and he has finally started to answer some questions of his own in a press availability in Asia. But, what we need is policy statements, speeches, public diplomacy conducted by people other than the president and the press secretary, who I don't think are the best face for America to the world right now on these issues.
And David, on the confirmation of all this, in court, lawyers never want to ask a question they don't know the answer to, because you end up looking really stupid. And here is Donald Trump out there, not prepared, and he says, well, just go ask Fox News. Now, the folks at Fox News, he talks to them all the time. His staff talks to them. He talks to Tucker Carlson. He could have checked this out. He clearly didn't, because after saying that, here's what happened. Shep Smith.
Fox News cannot confirm Judge Napolitano's commentary. Fox News knows of no evidence of any kind that the now President of the United States was surveilled at any time in any way. Full stop.
Full stop, David.
Well, kudos to Shep Smith and others at Fox who don't want to be tarred by Donald Trump's lies as much as others on the network have enabled him. And, we can never forget, Ari, and I know you don't, that this was a guy who for 3 years ran around saying, I have evidence that the president wasn't born in Hawaii. I have my investigators say, you can't believe what they're reporting to me. You can't believe the information I'm seeing. Information that we never saw, that even didn't make it to Newsmax. So this is a fellow who again and again commits the same crime. We shouldn't be surprised, and it's too bad that so many people have fallen for it. And now you see a lot of Republicans, Tom Cole's an exception, who still try to apologize for this, or at least, pretend it's not a very serious matter.
David, I think you may have just coined a new standard. The not even Newsmax will touch its standard for those who follow Newsmax.com. Evan, you wanted to get in.
Well, I want to say that this isn't just on foreign policy. We've seen a pattern here with the president since he took office where he'll say or do something and make a promise that he won't uphold. And how is that going to help him when he's negotiating with Congress over passing legislation and trying to strong-arm them into passing the Affordable Health Care Act on Thursday in the House when he goes back on his word? He did it last weekend with Preet Bharara. He did it with, he's now blaming other people and saying, oh, it was in scare quotes. I don't understand, and from the Republicans I've spoken to on the Hill, they are nervous. They don't think he can keep his word, and you need to have that as a president of the United States.